Oh, welcome everyone. This is part two of macros and micros, and really predominantly just to focus on micros. And in particular, we're going to focus on three particular micronutrients, which is B12, vitamin C, and vitamin D3. So today should be hopefully enlightening. I do appreciate we do go into a bit of science, and it gets pretty detailed in there, so bear with us. If you do have questions, certainly throw them in the chat. Don't be afraid. Everyone's probably thinking the same question because from the micros one last time, we certainly had a lot of questions afterwards. So let's go. I'm Scott Tyndall, co-founder. Elizabeth Impen is joining today, and we will be presenting this talk. So we'll go over quickly, as we said last time. Macros, they're the big ones. You need a lot of them: protein, fat, carbohydrates. I guess alcohol could be considered a fourth macro if you really want to get into the weeds. These are the ones that, are going to be dictated by your purpose and your lifestyle. Micros, that's what we're focused on today. These are the trace amounts, but they're certainly crucial to health. And if you are deficient or insufficient, it can have very dire consequences to health. So without banging on that anymore, and if people want a bit more information about that, you can certainly watch the last episode we did on this. So as discussed, we're going to do vitamin B12, C, and vitamin D with a focus on D3, not D2. So vitamin B12 considerations.
All right, so when it comes to sources, animal-based products are going to be your best sources. There are some plant ones, but for today, we're going to focus on the animal sources that you're getting within your diet. So that would be beef, liver, sardines, fatty fish like mackerel and salmon, and then fortified products. Most products now are fortified. And if you're going to look at, for plant-based athletes, either nutritional yeast or, as Scott has taught me, low sodium Vegemite is a good source. And the regular Vegemite is a good source of other B vitamins. So there are if you are eating a well-rounded animal-based diet, most people are meeting their daily nutritional requirements through the food that they eat, especially since so many products now that we consume are fortified with B vitamins, grains, breads, milks, those kinds of things. All right, testing, simple blood test that will look at B vitamins in general, but B12 specifically. You want to make sure that your levels are somewhere between, an easy way to remember it is like 400 to 800. And then again, that's like 485 to 775 or something like that. But 4 to 800 is a good range to be. And we're going to look at some of my testing a little bit later.
And what in particular, though, should we be looking at with testing, which again is something that I need to question with Inside Tracker, but what in particular active, we know that it's active B12 that should really be tested, which is otherwise known as hollow TC.
And you say that Inside Tracker doesn't test the active.
It's a little bit unclear at the moment. I think what they're reporting on is serum B12, which is actually fairly inaccurate. And so I just need clarification on that, and I have reached out to them to find out, but my understanding is they're actually reporting on B12 as opposed to active B12. And again, my understanding of this is that hollow TC, which is the official name, or active B12 is what athletes and individuals should be getting tested, because that will give you a much better accurate measurement of what your B12 status is.
And considering that when they've done testing, that I think it was like 90% of athletes that eat an animal-based diet are have enough in their level, have high enough B in their levels, that they're still within range. I don't want to raise the red flag and tell people they're not getting enough.
Well, no, it's a bit like magnesium. So it depends on what you're testing. The values are only as good as the test that's being applied. So if you just test serum magnesium, it'll probably come back that all right. But if you test red cell magnesium, you could actually be deplete.
Okay.
So that's probably, I think, the biggest point with vitamin B12 and active B12 is the test that needs to be applied. And my understanding, I think in Australia now, like if they test serum B12, if it is at a particular level, and I can't remember off the top of my head what the level is, but if it's low, then they will test active. But it's always like, why not just test active to start?
Yeah.
There's probably a cost implication there, like most things. So
yeah.
So yeah, that's the point for there. And I'd be interested to know how many athletes, are getting a hollow TC or active B12 tested as opposed to just their serum B12 from their doctors and whatnot.
All right, and then how B12 impacts your health. So when we look at the B vitamins in general, those are our energy vitamins, if you will. It's a water-soluble vitamin, but B12 specifically is involved with red blood cell formation, brain and nervous system function. If you don't have enough B12, that can lead to anemia, that weak, tired, exhausted feeling. That's one of the first symptoms that we look for if you're not recovering well and you're constantly feeling fatigued. It's also very important for endurance athletes because of that, its effects on hemoglobin and energy production, that they found in women specifically. If you have higher levels of B12, you have an enhanced endurance capacity, men not so much. But it's something that's very important. It's something that as we age, because in order to absorb B12, we need to have, like in our stomach, we have to have those gastric juices, the gastric acid helping to break that down. And as you get older, you have less digestive enzymes. So athletes that are 65 and above want to make sure that they're meeting their needs. Women on oral contraceptives, statistically, our vitamin B12 levels go down as we age, and during the years that if you're on an oral contraceptive, that can affect energy, fatigue, anemia, red blood cell formation. So something to consider. It's important, and it is involved, especially for sport and that performance endurance capacity.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that the only other thing that can cause depletion is alcohol consumption as well. I didn't know if you mentioned that or not, but certainly what's that?
I leave it out. We've talked about alcohol so much, but yes, it absolutely does.
Yeah, it's just something interesting because if you do drink wine or beer and you've got low B vitamin, especially B12, it could be something to consider. Is it negatively impacting the absorption from the gut of the B vitamins? And so, a bit like iron, it can have an impact on it as well. So just something to consider.
I already touched on performance, I think, in terms of how it helps and its impact on your health. And supplements, again, food source is always preferable. And then when it comes to B12 supplements, lozengers, chewables, they found that all of them, if you are supplementing, all of them are effective. There isn't one method that's more effective than the other. B12 shots are effective faster, but not always recommended because they're not regulated to the extent that a lot of our supplements are. So that's a precautionary tale. When you're looking at the B vitamins, I think kind of here, as we were talking about, B vitamins, if you're not getting them in your daily diet, again, for those plant-based athletes specifically, you want to be supplementing every day. And most B supplements, the chewable ones, I think are pretty much the easiest to do. And dosage, again, we'll touch on this when we're looking at the highlights, but most B12 supplements, either they're in a multivitamin, which Scott and I don't always recommend, or in that single, a B complex or a B or single B12 that you can get.
Yeah, I mean, I I played around with it. My B12 was always very low. So I was taking a B complex and then ended up going to a B12 specific spray, which was a liposomal spray by a company called Bioceuticals, which I believe is an Australian company. And you'll see on the next screen what happened when I was supplementing with that. And that was just 2 sprays sublingual, so under the tongue, each evening. And it you know, it obviously, like, we're looking at serum B12 levels, and I've got to get my, I think I do have them actually. I'll have a look whilst Elizabeth's going through her results, but you know, you can see what happened pretty quickly. So I'm a big believer in single ingredient sprays when you're trying to, you know, purposely trying to change something. So in my experience, the single ingredient B12 as a spray pack under the tongue twice a day, 2 sprays every day for 8 weeks certainly had a positive impact.
So this is a shot from my Inside Tracker results that I wanted to show. 2 reasons. One, to show that we're not always optimal, even when you know what you should be doing. Secondly, you can see where when I was supplementing with B12 before testing, when I just assumed that I was low because I was feeling weak and fatigued, which again, the importance of testing, my levels were high, above the optimal range. When I just focused on diet and implemented, you know, they make suggestions, choose a higher fatty fish, increase your B12 with a supplement. This is when it was low. When I was just focusing on diet and eating well, it was in the optimal zone. And when I wasn't eating well, significantly overtraining and under fueling, it was low. And this is something to point out, the effect of under fueling and overtraining. It doesn't just come out in vitamin D levels or hormone levels, like your B vitamins, if you're not fueling properly, especially if you're staying away from carbohydrates. And I think at this time, back when I had this one, I wasn't eating oats every day or cereals or fortified breads. And that has an impact. So the importance of making sure that you're getting your B vitamins through your food.
And then this was mine. So it wasn't that I was ever super low, but I certainly was like, oh, could it be a little bit better? So I then took this, and that was, I think it was 6 or 8 weeks that I did it for, and you can see what happened to my serum B12 level. Now, the testing in Australia, this wasn't an active B12, even though I requested it, which is, again, one of those things that can happen. But the definition under Australia is that at or below 340 p-mol per litre will then instantly require then an active B12 test. But my point being is I would actually like to know where I sit from a you know, perspective of active B12 versus serum B12. But certainly I removed the spray, and I don't do it anymore, just bringing it down. And I will then, I've got a blood test coming up later this month where I will get that checked again and see where it's sitting, and hopefully back into a normal range. But it does show you the impact of a supplement can have very quickly. So just taking supplements and not necessarily checking the impact of them could potentially have issues, you know, down the line. So it's just important to make sure that you recognize that the impact of supplementation.
All right, so the key takeaways on B12 for like what it does in your body: energy production, muscle repair, red blood cell formation, brain and nerve health. About 80% of plant-based athletes are low on B12, and then females lower than males, as I pointed out earlier, and those of 65 and older are also low. Blood levels, you want 500 to 800. Food sources, everyone's favorite: liver, beef, sardines, mackerel, salmon, some of the dairy products like feta, cottage cheese. nutritional yeast, and then any products that are fortified, which most, especially in the US, most here are. Their duration, in terms of injections, you can see B12 levels rise in a matter of days, and then over a matter of weeks if you're doing the pills, food, or the spray, like Scott showed. 2 to 4 mcg a day, and then dosing is daily. It's one of those that we need to take on a daily, consistent basis.
Do you still take a B12 supplement, Elizabeth? Do you take anything?
I stopped because I want to test again with it just being diet. So
Just through diet.
yeah, constant
Yeah.
experiment.
Yeah, I think it is. Like, I mean, the thing with, like, again, B supplements and B complexes is, I mean, because it's a water soluble vitamin, a lot of it is lost in, when you go to the toilet. So it's always interesting, how do you improve the absorption, which is why I went for the sublingual sort of liposomal spray, which, I'd been told and read that, bioavailability was better, and it certainly seemed to have a positive impact on that. When you're taking a B complex pill, your wee just tends to go very bright yellow, and you're sort of like, hence why the doses in there are often so high as well. Like when you compare to the RDA, they'll sort of be 1,500% or 2,500% above the recommended RDA, because I think predominantly a lot of it is lost in the urine. So
yeah.
Anyway, very interesting. Okay.
All right, vitamin C sources. So I think we'll dig into it a little bit, but again, vitamin C, if you are eating the recommended fruit and veg that Scott and I have every day, you're probably meeting your vitamin C requirements. So sources, citrus foods, obviously, that's one that everybody knows, but berries, camu camu, it's actually a powder, big in the health world, great to add to smoothies, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, bell peppers, kale, all of those kinds of things, snow peas. So you really getting those from that fruit and veg that we want to make sure that you're eating on a consistent basis. Testing for levels. This is something that Inside Tracker does not test for on their panel. Scott, have you had your vitamin C levels tested?
No, I've never had it tested, and I probably don't necessarily think it needs to be.
I've never had it tested. It's something that it's one of those that I supplement with because I've seen the studies, especially in the cold and flu season, especially when I'm in competition, but it's not something that I would reach out for and have levels tested.
Yeah. Maybe we should, because it is one of those supplements that is recommended quite a lot, to assist an athlete, especially in high training volume or at periods of time when, you are sick in particular, when it can be useful. So yeah, I don't know, maybe it should be.
I should look. I don't even know where. I mean, obviously, I'm sure like a Quest Labs or something would, but I've never seen it on a panel, so I don't even know.
Yeah,
like the cost associated with it.
No.
So in terms of your health, the big, I think the two main things would be immunity and then helping with absorption of iron, which again is important for endurance athletes, females specifically. Heart health, brain health. The nice thing and the hard thing that it is to look about vitamin C foods is that because they're in foods that are so specifically good for other things, heart health, brain health, it's hard to say if the vitamin C is actually the reason that your health is so good. So they have done studies that show that vitamin C helps with women that were likely to get breast cancer. They supplemented for 6 years and their levels of breast cancer were lower than the control group. But again, is it because they were eating fruit and veg and having higher levels of other nutrients, or because they didn't put them on a vitamin C supplement? Vitamin C can help with macular degeneration. Some studies have shown that diets high in vitamin C, again, a diet high in vitamin C can help with cardiovascular health. but is that because of the other components and micronutrients that you see in fruit and veg?
And I think that's a very good point in general with all these micronutrients is a lot of the time nature intended them to be consumed together, not necessarily in isolation as well, which I guess could go against what I said about the B12. But, you know, again, predominantly the food sources, and this probably relates to next week's talk about food first, yet not food only, is that, you know, vitamin C is contained not just in fruit, but vegetables as well. And to Elizabeth's point, like all the other micronutrients that are contained in there, along with macronutrients, carbohydrates, that's how it was intended to be consumed. And if you do consume enough of them, as you saw with the sleep and nutrition talks, that, you know, there are multitudes of positive health benefits from consuming fruit and vegetables. And one of the key components within them is vitamin C. And I'm sure it has a positive impact on health in combination with everything else. If you, yeah, and I guess we'll touch on, you know, what goes wrong when you consume potentially, what you can do when things are going wrong and why vitamin C could be good, but also vitamin C toxicity as well and where it could go wrong. So,
yeah. So on the performance aspect of it, vitamin C is an antioxidant. So it can help in that reducing that exercise induced reaction. So the soreness, the inflammation, vitamin C is very helpful for that. And that's why we encourage antioxidants, vitamin E, vitamin C, to consume those in your diet, because you are asking a lot of your body as an athlete. And while part of the growth and development that athletes do requires that muscle breakdown, you want to help your body in the best way possible to make sure that it is regrowing and that you are reducing environmental oxidative damage. So it's that fine balance of some damage is good, a lot of damage is bad, especially if it comes from outside sources. But it can help with fatigue, with performance, with muscular recovery, and then also immune function. We know when you're training hard, immune function drops, and vitamin C very much helps with immunity and can help make sure that that you're able to maintain performance.
So just on that though, like what's the negative impact potentially of taking vitamin C in relation to performance though?
So what it can do, and I would say maybe 4 or 5 years ago, because everyone was encouraging, you know, vitamin C, keep your immune system going, take high doses of vitamin C. We know that vitamin C helps with collagen absorption. The problem they found was because vitamin C is such a good antioxidant, that it was counteracting the training, specifically bodybuilding or strength training and very hard endurance sessions. Athletes weren't getting those muscular adaptations. So it was lowering that desired inflammation, and therefore, I don't want to say negating the workout or the training session, but negating the training and the workout session. So the problem became then making sure that you're taking enough vitamin C and getting enough throughout your day to help, that you need daily to help keep your body, but not have it around training. And to keep it separate so that you're not impacting the training that you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding and reading through that though was like what was happening was people were taking super doses of vitamin C in supplemental form. So they were taking 4,000 to 8,000 milligrams of vitamin C. And I saw this, you know, we had players taking 4,000 milligrams in an evening after playing because they believed it helped them recover. And potentially it does help them recover, but it's these super doses of supplemental form vitamin C that you don't need to be taking if you're trying to adapt to training. And so this is when I saw on social media, I think a year ago, people were like, oh, you shouldn't eat blueberries after training. And it's like, that is absolute horseshit. Like, you can eat vitamin C, guys. Like, you can eat fruit and veg, you can have fruit and veg after training and not worry about blunting adaptation. Okay, what we're talking about here is super dosing, with vitamin C after training. So taking 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 milligrams in supplemental form of vitamin C and E is where a lot of the negative sort of consequences have been shown. And just on that, like there are studies that show, like, you know, like anything, if you take too much of anything, it can increase, you know, the risk of, you know, negative, have a negative impact on health, in particular, the risk of cancer. So, you know, super high doses of vitamin E and vitamin C has got correlations to increased risk of certain types of cancers as well. So it's, you know, it's being aware of what, you know, when we're talking about vitamin C, I think we're talking more about like getting it from food.
Yes.
And there are particular times when vitamin C supplementation in high doses could be, you know, useful, which is again this impact one, which Elizabeth will just discuss in terms of illness and when you may want to consider these super sort of physiological doses.
Yeah. And to your point about the blueberries, I looked it up. So 1 cup of blueberries has 25% of your daily RDA. And that's first of all, a whole cup. I don't know how many of us are actually putting on a whole cup of blueberries on our oatmeal, but that's only a quarter. And so so 4 cups just get you to your RDA, and these higher supplemental doses were like 6 times that. So who amongst us is eating 20 cups of blueberries? Like so to your point, that don't eat your fruit and veg, anything with vitamin C around your training is just ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. However, then that impact, and this is where immunity and health is concerned. If you are leading up to, you know, if you know you're leading into race week, which already the stress from that, the potential travel, changes in sleep schedule, you're already more likely to pick up something in terms of getting sick. You don't want to get sick, certainly. So a time that you would consider adding in vitamin C, your training is lowered, so you're not worried about the impact. Like you don't have any essential training sessions where those muscular adaptations are essential. Is it worth it to make sure and help support your immune system leading into a race, leading into a big personal event or travel? And then 2, if you are getting sick or starting to feel sick, if you can shorten the duration of that cold or flu by adding substantial amounts of vitamin C, that benefit outweighs the potential loss of training. You're sick anyway. You're not going to be doing, at least hopefully you're not doing training sessions. That is a good time then when you are sick to be implementing higher amounts of vitamin C. And that's where that 1,000 to up to 4,000 milligrams of vitamin C can be useful. And the sooner that you do it, as you're starting to feel sick, the sooner that you implement the vitamin C, it's not going to keep you from getting sick, but it will shorten the duration, vitamin C in combination with zinc. So point being, leading up to races, key events, if you're already sick, the benefit outweighs the risk or consequence, if you will, of supplementing with higher doses of vitamin C. Again, ingredients, timing, food best, supplements. I personally don't like the vitamin C chewables. They're super tart. I like taking them in pill form. And if I'm going to supplement, the pill form is a higher concentration usually. So if you're looking for 1,000 milligrams, it's easier to get in a single pill than in like 4 chewables. Timing, again, away from training, but daily if you are worried about getting sick, if you're already sick. And again, during the cold and flu season, supplementing with vitamin C is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just you want to look at balancing that with your training, with your objectives, and utilizing it at times that are right for you. So key takeaways: helps with immunity, iron deficiency, and any kind of chronic condition. Again, this is where it's hard to delineate, but chronic inflammation, chronic fatigue, autoimmune conditions, any kind of cardiac, heart condition, Alzheimer's, a lot of those have shown that people that consistently meet their RDA for vitamin C are less likely to suffer from those chronic conditions. The population affected, again, it's not tested. So
just on that, sorry, the one thing, if we think of, this is like scurvy is obviously one of the biggest, if you're deficient in vitamin C, that's where scurvy comes from. So every Australian knows that because Captain Cook, obviously, all his people had, all the sailors and the convicts had scurvy. So he got them, what did he get them to have? I'm trying to remember. Was it sauerkraut or something? He got them to all have, and it got rid of scurvy, but it was because of vitamin C deficiency. So if you've got scurvy, then you're vitamin C deficient. Just a little fun fact.
Your blood levels, if you are testing between 0.4 and 1.7, I mentioned earlier the best food sources. I call them the C's and B's: citrus fruit, berries, cauliflower, broccoli, bell peppers, kiwi, guava fruit, all of those good ones.
What's the KGKS again?
Kiwi, guava, kale, snow peas.
And what?
Snow peas. They're
snow peas. Yeah.
For vegetables, they're one of the highest, and I always like adding those to salads.
And C is citrus and B is berries. Yeah.
Yes, and then also cauliflower, broccoli, Brussels sprouts. It's like I was gonna try to make a cool mnemonic device, but it was all consonants, so that was just like, oh, forget it.
That's cool.
Duration and effect, again, as soon as you start to feel sick, increase. If you know you're not eating, again, you could be traveling, it could be a stressful time, you might not have gone grocery shopping for the week. Like, I always have vitamin C supplement or pills at my house, so it's something, if you're not meeting your nutritional needs through food, vitamin C is a good supplement to have around. But specifically, as soon as you start to feel sick, the sooner the better. 1,000 to 8,000, depending on how sick you are. Warning, Scott gave me this when it was last fall, or whenever I was really, really sick, and Scott very kindly is like, you need a lot more vitamin C. I think I was doing 4,000 and you told me to up it to 8, with the warning that it would give me dietary issue, like GI issues, and it did. So if you have a lot of vitamin C, it can cause bathroom issues. FYI.
So just on that, the reason I put in the 8,000, I upgraded it from 4,000 is because when I say increase your amount, you're increasing by 1,000 milligrams per day whilst symptoms persist, and definitely don't jump from 4,000 to 8,000. And that was maybe on me, because that will probably give you diarrhea. But you're doing that in conjunction with zinc. So again, your zinc intake's probably somewhere between 50 up to 100 milligrams a day for a short duration while symptoms exist. And that is purely to reduce severity and duration of sickness symptoms. You are not being recommended to take 4,000 to 8,000 milligrams per day of supplemental vitamin C during normal times. Okay. Some people will take 500 to 1,000 milligrams daily just to, they feel like it helps them during periods of heavy training. But again, be aware, if you're taking high dose, i.e. 4,000 to 8,000 milligrams of supplemental vitamin C, it could have a negative effect on physiological adaptation to training, and potentially increase the risk of, long-term, if that's chronic supplementation, potentially, leave you at risk of other chronic diseases. So we're not saying do that. Please don't do that.
Yeah, exactly. I remember I used to have an athlete that had those emergency packets and would just add them to their water bottle whilst training, because they thought that would help. So it's like, that's the high dose component that we're talking about, and how you need to be aware of how many products, whether it's your multivitamin or an emergency packet or whatever, how high of dose those supplements are. I think they're 1,000 to 1,500 in each one. So just be aware with what you're taking and putting in your body. Daily dosing, again, not around training. And then if you're working on increasing your iron, having the vitamin C helps with iron absorption. So having it with those iron rich foods is going to help.
Yep. Okay. Vitamin D3. Obviously vitamin D3 is apparently a miracle vitamin. It's not a vitamin, it's a hormone, a fat soluble hormone. We are going to focus on performance elements here because there is a whole lot of stuff that vitamin D3 is correlated to, and I think it's too broad a scope to get into it. So we're going to focus on performance. Sources. Oops, sorry, I'm pressing too many buttons. Sources. D2 comes from plants, D3 from animals and sunlight. So you can get it through fortified plants or fortified foods, so cereals, milk, things like that. But generally speaking, D2 will come from plants, D3 will come from animal sources and sunlight. To be fair, I haven't seen any convincing data that you're going to get your vitamin D amount through animals, okay? I think you're either going to get it through sunlight, and depending on the time of year and other factors, then such as your skin pigmentation, the time of year, the latitude that you live. If you're above 40 north, then you're probably in a bit of dire, you're in trouble, i.e. anyone in the Northern Hemisphere from October onwards, you're going to have trouble doing this. If as I said, skin pigmentation, if you're black, if you're Hispanic, if you're very dark skin, then you're going to have more issues with production of vitamin D from sunlight. Clothing obviously comes into it, use of sunscreen comes into it as well, and they're all going to have a negative impact on vitamin D production by the skin. So this is where, in particular, supplementation is probably your best bet. Okay, in terms of testing, you should be getting vitamin D testing, okay? I think everyone should get it in around October, November, and then 6 months later around April, May. This allows you to see how you've gone through summer, coming into winter, and then after winter, coming into summer, where are you sitting in those levels? And I think that just makes, for me, it sort of makes complete sense, but maybe I'm just a bit weird. I think you should be getting it done twice a year. If you are deficient, then 8 to 12 weeks later after supplementing, you should be looking at getting it retested. Just so you know, in terms of, so you're getting your serum concentration of what's called 25 OHD is the best indicator of your vitamin D3 status, okay? It has a half-life of about 15 days, and it is going to be, generally in the Northern Hemisphere, it's going to be reported as nanograms per milliliter. If you're in the Southern Hemisphere, it will be reported as nanomoles per liter. To convert nanograms per milliliter to nanomoles per liter, times it by 2.5. Okay, rickets, we're talking old diseases here. Rickets like scurvy used to exist. Rickets actually has started apparently making a comeback. And I don't know if this is because people aren't being exposed to sun anymore, or there's chronic vitamin D deficiencies, but rickets has been reported as occurring. Now, if you're less than 10 nanograms per milliliter, in children, rickets is going to be at risk, and for adults, osteomalacia. Osteomalacia is softening of the bones, okay? And that's really important to know. If you're at risk of osteoporosis or osteopenia, and you have very, very low vitamin D status, then you are probably predisposing yourself to a lifelong life of misery. Deficiency is going to be graded at less than 20 nanograms per milliliter. That's from the Endocrine Society definition. There are varying degrees of what is deficient or insufficient. Certainly less than 39 nanograms per milliliter is going to be defined as insufficiency. Sufficient, therefore, is somewhere between 40 and 69 nanograms per milliliter, with the optimal for adults, again, depending on what you're reading and who you're talking to, I think based on what Graham Close and his group have done is around that 70 nanograms per milliliter should be the ballpark that athletes should be aiming for. Okay. Where does it sit? What does vitamin D3 do? It has functions in calcium homeostasis, okay? So in conjunction with parathyroid hormone, it's going to help with bone health, okay? First and foremost, I think is that performance? Well, if your bones suck, then you're probably not going to be doing very much running, biking, or anything else. So I think from a bone perspective, this is where vitamin D is so important. It does have a role in protein synthesis and gene expression. So it is very important, and it is correlated to its role in strength, muscular atrophy, and sarcopenia. We've talked about sarcopenia in the past, that progressive loss of muscle as we age. So again, if you are in that masters category, i.e. over 35, or certainly getting into the older athlete over 60, then levels of vitamin D should be certainly assessed for their role in things like sarcopenia, along with osteopenia and osteoporosis. So then putting in play testing like your bone mineral density with your DEXA scan. It also plays a role in immune function. So I think that's really important as well. So if we break down the bone health, so stress fractures are correlated to levels of less than 30. So there is a higher frequency of stress fractures for athletes who have a level less than 30 nanograms per milliliter. What else? Immune function. I know you've probably read a heap of stuff about this in terms of COVID. There are a number of systematic reviews. One that I pulled up, which was from the journal, the Cardiology Journal, which is a reputable journal. Low serum vitamin D levels were statistically significantly associated, so not causal, just correlated with the risk of COVID-19 infection. So again, anything less than that 39 would sort of say, okay, if you're in that suboptimal zone, if you put it up, could you potentially reduce the risk of something like the COVID infection? Potentially, but just something to think about. And then, as I said, from a protein muscle perspective, there's certainly an association with sarcopenia or muscular atrophy, and there is a positive or a negative association with, or an inverse relationship between lower serum vitamin D and higher incidence of chronic muscular tendinous type injuries. So I think that's, again, it's just something to think about if you are one of those athletes who either suffers from stress fractures, suffers from tendon injuries or repeated injuries or chronic injuries. Is your vitamin D level suboptimal? Same with immune function. Is it suboptimal? And therefore, should you potentially be, doing something about it to improve? From a performance standpoint, it's really interesting. And when we're talking performance, let's talk about like strength and performance measures like vertical jump and that. Systematic reviews are obviously our go-to in terms of evidence. Now, there are a number of systematic reviews which have conflicting evidence. So there's a bit of a mind cluster for you if you ever want one. Again, limited amount of research or randomized controlled studies looking at the effect of vitamin D supplementation on performance measures. One that I pulled up looked at males. Sorry, phone call, sorry. Looked at 18 to 45-year-olds, males and females. So again, doesn't quite hit the upper end of what we're talking about. Supplementation was between 4 weeks and 6 months. They were doing between 2,000 IU a day or 14,000 IU a week, up to 40,000 IU a week. Some of the studies, they found that D3, getting them up to not an optimal zone, so none of them ever got up to the 70 zone, but when they got above 40, then they did see improvements in isometric grip strength, isometric bench press, and isometric squat, but it had to go above that 40 level. So even if they saw improvements from insufficient or deficient, if it didn't get above 40, then it didn't seem to have an effect. And that was supported by other systematic reviews where even if they were supplementing with 3,000 IU a day, so international units of vitamin D3 a day, unless they achieved that 40 nanograms per milliliter, it didn't seem to have any positive performance effect, which I thought was pretty interesting. In terms of the impact, I think we talked about, osteomalacia, softening of the bones. That certainly is something very, very negative. The reports in, again, the literature seem to have somewhere between 30 and 40% of the adult population in the world being insufficient or deficient in vitamin D. That number jumps significantly if you're an athlete. So it jumps up to somewhere around estimates between 56 and 80% of all athletes being deficient. So this is put down to athletes having a higher demand for vitamin D because of higher calcium demand. You can imagine all the impact and whatnot. So I think that is something to consider. The other consideration is because vitamin D3 is a fat soluble vitamin. If you're an athlete, typically you have more lean mass and typically less fat mass, and vitamin D is stored in fat mass. So this can be something, if you're a super lean athlete, it could be something to consider, that your vitamin D levels could be negatively impacted by your lean body status. So again, something pretty interesting. What was the other thing? That may explain male versus female differences, but again, the amount of literature done on females versus males is lacking. And I don't think that's any criticism of the researchers. It's more that just women haven't been available for research. So if there are women out there willing to get involved in vitamin D research, I would strongly, and if you're an athlete, please try and do it. Check your local universities and see if anyone's doing vitamin D studies on athletes. I think it'd be really cool. There doesn't seem to be any significant difference in insufficiency percentages between males and females, but again, there is a lack of female subjects. What else? Supplementation. So supplements should have vitamin D3 in it, and that's about it. I think if you're going to take a vitamin D supplement, I would just take vitamin D3. The dosage is pretty, I wouldn't say controversial, but it's certainly something that's pretty interesting. So the Institute of Medicine sets an upper limit of 4,000 IU per day, international units per day, whereas the Endocrine Society sets an upper limit for 10,000 IU per day. I tend to go with the Endocrine Society in terms of 10,000 IU per day for individual athletes who require it. So what that means is, if you are insufficient or deficient, certainly if you're less than 20 or less than 39, our general recommendation, or certainly my specific recommendation, is 10,000 IU a day, Monday to Friday. So that is 50,000 IU per week. You would take this for 8 weeks and then get retested. And in my experience, this is a very effective dosing regime to get your levels to optimal. Now, I will caveat that with that some people might not want to take that, so probably drop down to 5,000 IU a day, or Monday to Friday, that would be 25,000 IU per week. I would suggest, though, if you are going to take vitamin D3 as a supplement, there is one other supplement to take. Again, I would take them as separate supplements, and that is vitamin K2. So there is really interesting research that shows that vitamin K2 can improve vitamin D levels when taken somewhere between 100 and 200 micrograms. So it's not milligrams of vitamin K2, it is micrograms, mcg. You got your hand up, E?
I do. I have a couple questions. How come you say to take them separately? Because a lot of D3 supplements now have K2 in them. Is there a problem? Because
most of them only have like 25 or 50 of K2. So it now depends on what the dosage of vitamin D is. Whereas like, it's just so much, I just think it's so much easier. Like, I think I saw the Thorn one and it was like 2,000, it might be 4,000 IU of vitamin D, but only, I think it's got 50 of vitamin K2. And I'm like, oh, it just makes it difficult. So my recommendation would be, like, I think the Thorn vitamin D, and that's what I take. I get the 5,000 IU pills rather than the 10,000. So if I need 10,000 a day, I take 2 of them, and I buy the vitamin K2 from a company called Now, which gives me 150 micrograms of vitamin K2. I take one of those and I take 2 Thorn 5000 IU. It works, okay? There's my vitamin D, okay? Like there's periods of time where I think the 1/3 across from when it was at its lowest was when I was in Toronto. Clearly when it was high was when I was in Bermuda. I was then supplemented again and it's gone back up after the last 2. I haven't been taking any vitamin D. So the last test there was taken in November. It's been summer here in Australia. I haven't taken any vitamin D since. I will get a test done coming up in the next couple of months to check before I go into winter to ensure that my level is right. You will get this variation, and certainly when it was right up in the 100 was when I was in Bermuda and supplementing, and I realized it was too high. You don't want to be taking too much vitamin D because it could cause hypercalcemia, okay, and too much calcium. So you don't want to be doing that. There is toxicity associated with vitamin D. Some people will say, oh, you can take as much as you want, 50,000. I remember hearing Charles Poliquin saying, yeah, just take 100,000 IU a day. And everyone was like, yeah, that's awesome. And then he obviously died at 55, which, amongst other things, was probably associated with some things that he was doing. I'll probably get in trouble for saying that, but oh well. There are upper limits to all these supplements. As we said, too much vitamin C can be detrimental. Too much vitamin D can be detrimental. Again, monitor what's going on. Test, don't guess. Get your levels checked so that if you are supplementing with vitamin D and your levels are getting high, you can just drop down and then not have to be doing it, but just knowing that you're in that optimal zone. So key takeaways, bone, definitely bone is the key. Protein, gene expression around protein and muscle, very important, and immune system. Super high percentages of athletes in particular being insufficient or deficient. And as I said, those blood levels there, so less than 20, you're deficient. Obviously less than 10, you're in dire need of getting some vitamin D into you. Anything less than 40, really, you should be considering, talking to a professional about, do you require vitamin D supplementation? Best sources are sunlight, but if, as I said, it's greater than 40 degrees north latitude, you are going to struggle with production of vitamin D through the skin in the winter months. Fortified foods can be useful, but certainly supplementation of D3. Somewhere between that 8 and 12 weeks is going to have a positive effect on your serum levels. And as I said, somewhere between 10,000 to 50,000 IU per week is recommended. So if you've got good levels, somewhere around that 2,000 to 3,000 IU per day, Monday to Friday, would get you up into that 10 to 12,000 per week. And as I said, vitamin K2 at 150 micrograms Monday to Friday with the vitamin D3 would be recommended. And just throwing on that, there is some interesting sort of vitamin K deficiency is, it's linked to this weird marker called osteocalcin, but it has been found this osteocalcin is very high in postmenopausal women who have osteopenia and osteoporosis. So again, for maybe osteoporotic women out there who are menopausal and can't get their bone mineral density better, it could be something to have a chat to your doctor about measuring this. It's called undercarboxylated osteocalcin. There's again some conflicting evidence about it being a relative measure of vitamin K status in bone, but not necessarily a biomarker of bone health. So it's related to K2 deficiency, but not necessarily a direct measure on your bone health. But if you have something like a bone scan to support that, and maybe your vitamin D levels, and it's all in the wrong position, then doing something about it may have a positive effect.
So a couple questions before we go off vitamin D. Since it's a fat-soluble vitamin, when should they take it? With a meal, without? Is there studies to show, does it matter?
Yeah, I think I've heard people say that you should be taking it with some fat. Look, I take it in the evening with dinner. That's when I take it. I just think just makes sense. I don't like taking any vitamins without food anyway. It makes me feel sick. So I tend to take it at night. There's usually some mixed macronutrients in what I'm eating. So yeah, it's going to contain fat, but I don't go out of my way to have it with a fat bomb or anything like that. Like I'm not eating avocado or eggs in particular to make sure that I'm absorbing it. Absorption doesn't seem to be a problem.
Is there a difference between a liquid vitamin D3 and a pill? Have you seen any?
I think this is a bit like creatine, honestly. There's all these different forms of creatine, and creatine monohydrate works. I think you just take the cheapest, as long as it's vitamin D3, take it in cheap form and it's good. You know, I think it's the dosage of it that probably makes the biggest difference. I have heard of liposomal D3 and all this stuff, but I don't know. They're tiny little pills too. They're so small. So I'm always like, you know, just swallow one of them. It's fine.
And I only ask because Athletic Greens are least favorite miracle green supplement. They give you liquid vitamin D3 as like part of, I don't know, to justify the super high cost. And they're like, here's a year's worth of vitamin D3 in like liquid dropper form, which it's not a year if you're trying to get 50,000 a week. But I just,
how many drops, how many IU is it per drop? Is it 1,000 per drop? So it's probably 10 drops.
Yeah.
You're doing that. Look, I'm sure it's effective. It's just, is it required and is it expensive? But I mean, the fact that they're giving it away probably indicates the cost of the product. So again, I'll probably get in trouble for saying that.
Yeah, wow.
But yeah, that's, does anyone have any questions? I know it all gets pretty hot and heavy with some of the science, but is everyone supplementing with vitamin D? Just out of interest, does everyone take it? Yeah, Adrian's in Australia.
Yeah, so I just checked my Swiss jar, and I'm taking like one a day, which is like 1,000 IU.
Yeah.
So I recently got my bloods done, and I'm at 138 nmol for vitamin D. So there's nothing wrong. I could double that.
Yeah. So the problem. So in Australia, under TGA, the Therapeutic Goods of Australia, they only allow the sale of 1,000 IU. It is, I'm just going to, probably pretty outdated,
right.
Because if you look at the research, like a lot of the research is showing that probably supplementation of around 3,000 at least is sufficient to get levels up to close to 40, but maybe not even get them above. So if you're only taking 1,000, you're probably not going to get it up there high enough. So if you're, what did you say you're at? You're at
138. So when I went to the GP, I just
divide
got a
that by
basic
2.5. What's that? That's around 10. So I don't know, what's that? Yeah, you're pretty good. You're at 50, about 50, 45, something like that. So you're in the normal zone, but you're maybe not, you know, up there. So yeah, potentially taking sort of 2,000 or 3,000 IU would probably get you there a little bit quicker.
Okay. All right. Funny, you think you're doing the right thing, and then you're like, okay, you start talking like 50,000 a week.
You definitely don't need that, Adrian.
No,
you're not insufficient or deficient at this point in time. So, and you're also in Australia where at the moment it's summer, and I didn't touch on that actually. 15 minutes full exposure. So if you got your budgies, jump out in the sun.
Yeah, got them.
No, yeah, of course you do. No sunlight, no sunscreen, no sunglasses, full body exposure. Read the newspaper on a sun lounger for 15 minutes, get a tan, and you'll get your vitamin D. Like greatest vitamin ever. You know, there's a reason to tan. So it is really interesting actually talking about that. So one of the reasons a lot of people think that maybe there is this insufficiency or high levels of deficiency is there is very much a very strong, what we call a slip, slop, slap program in Australia, which is aimed at preventing skin cancer. And it's super important, but it's also maybe gone the other way where people aren't getting any sun exposure.
Definitely.
And then you couple that with COVID, being inside all the time. If you're a triathlete and you're going out swimming, maybe you're not getting full exposure. If you're biking, are you in long pants, long sleeves, wearing sunglasses and a helmet? If you're running, are you running in full leg full leggings, long sleeves and a hat and sunglasses, you're outside, you think you're being exposed, but you're actually not exposed at all. And so, and it's hard because 15 minutes, like, you know, how do you break that up in the day? But yeah, it is something just to factor in if you are deficient, trying to get that 15 minutes of sun exposure without burning yourself and so on.
Cool, thank you.
Cool. Any other questions? Amy, did you have any questions?
I think she said in the comments she's making dinner, so she might be
Oh, okay.
multitasking.
No,
I'm done with dinner. I'm on my trainer and my gel. This is very interesting. I didn't really have any questions. I picked a question in the meetup, but it had to do with a sweat test question. So I don't know if you want me to save that for Q&A.
I will save that one.
Or do you want to know it now? Or, oh.
We'll save that one.
All right.
No, that's cool. It's breaking up a little bit as well. Sonia, did you have any questions?
Okay, no worries.
Les, did you have any questions? Everyone's on mute.
We covered it all.
It's all right. Deepa, any questions from you? Everyone's on mute. Unmute.
Okay.
I'm good, thank you. This was very informative.
Cool. Okay, thanks, Deepa. Well, look, if there's no questions, we will leave it there until next week. Next week's one is on food first, yet not food only. So I think it's a nice follow-up to all of these ones and the importance of looking at your diet as a whole, but also considering when to complement it with supplements. Cool.
All right.
Sonia, did you have any questions? Just I saw you're unmuted.
No, all good. Thanks.
You're good, Les? Cool.
Yeah.
Sonia, you're good? She's good. Okay. Cool. Thanks, everyone. We'll speak to you soon.
Thank you.